So the events last weekend mark the functional end of organized play in 2024. So with the whole year's events now behind us, and the LL points tallied up, and all the products released and purchased, what were the highlights and the lowlights of Flesh and Blood in 2024? A huge shout out to our channel members for supporting what we do here. If you want to get involved with the channel and the Dice Commando community, please consider joining as a channel member. Remember, these videos are only possible with your support. You can show that support with a like, a subscribe, and by leaving us a comment and sharing your feedback. Community first, and go Commando. Hey there, my Flesh and Blood friends. Welcome back to Dice Commando and Go Again, a fabulous cast, and thanks so much for tuning in here on your Flesh and Blood Friday, and actually one of the last Flesh and Blood Fridays of the year. There's only one more after this one, but today I want to do a year in review, because last weekend marked the end of Skirmish Season 10, and also the end of there are no more callings, no more battle hardens through the end of the year, which means that all the Living Legend points have been logged. Now, in all fairness, the Living Legend one in Chicago didn't actually have LL points with it. I like how that's kind of funny, right? But it all makes sense. But we did have Skirmish Season 10. So we'll start off by looking at some more factual bestest and worstest. And then I want to spend the rest of the time just kind of talking about the year, given some of my personal takes, things that I think went well, things that I think could go better, and really want to celebrate a lot of what happened this year, because this was a big year for Flesh and Blood from a lot of angles. One of change, one of a lot of new stuff, and it's 5th year, so a lot of celebration as well. So let's get into this. Now, from the classic constructed side of things, this year there were a total of 8,293 Living Legend points logged for our classic constructed heroes. Now, shouldn't be too much of a surprise when I throw up the top 5 that we have Zen at number 1, pulling down 845 points, representing 10.2% of the year's earnings. In second place, we have Armed Kayo with 707 points, the vast majority of which were earned during Heavy Hitters season when there were 3,300 points on the table prior to the points rebalance in the springtime. And Kayo took down 8.5% of the year's points. Enigma making a strong showing, especially with that World's boost at 690 points, representing 8.3%. Azalea also doing very well during the Heavy Hitters meta, 605 points for 7.3% of the year's earnings. And then New in our 5th spot with 580 points at 7.0% of the meta. We would also be remiss to not give a head nod to our single Living Legend on the year, which was Dromai, bringing in 468 points at 5.7%, keeping in mind that she LL'd very, very early in the year during the middle of the Heavy Hitters meta, or I should say near the end of the Heavy Hitters meta, which of course capped her. Otherwise, we could have probably expected her to continue to do her reign of terror, although we'll see how she would have, who knows how she would have done in the Mistveil meta. So that rounds out the classic constructed wins, and now I'd like to go over and look at the Blitz wins. However, with a bit of a caveat in that it's very difficult to compare the big winners in Blitz because of the way that points are done in Blitz, right? The vast majority of the points injections come during skirmish season. And this year we had 2 very different skirmish seasons in terms of how the points were allocated. Skirmish season 9, we had a very large bucket of points. And then for Skirmish Season 10, they moved to the 1,500 cap. But something else happened in there. Remember, it used to be 500 cap for Living Legend, for Blitz. Now it's 1,000. So what happened was not only was that big bucket of points at 500, but then they effectively halved the weighting of points and then decreased the points. So we had this massive injection of points in Skirmish Season 9, but Skirmish Season 10, although it was still its own meta, its own skirmish season, its own points injection, really carried so much little weight. So if we were to look at just points earned raw, it wouldn't really make any sense and there wouldn't be any comparable. So what I've done instead, you can see up right now, let's look at the top heroes of both of these seasons. And then I've got a little thing that I'll put together where I believe I know who the top 5 were through the year. So during Skirmish Season 9, we saw Zen pull down 21.3% of the wins, Victor at just over 15%, Rhinar at 11.8%. Remember, he did LL that season. Blaze at just shy of 10%, and then Kayo at 7.7%. In Skirmish Season 10, we saw Blaze as our big winner at 12.4%, right? Much more, Skirmish Season 10 was a significantly flatter and more widespread meta than was Skirmish 9. Kayo coming in at 11.7%, and that is armed Kayo. Zen at just under 10%. Aurora, newcomer on the scene, at just over 8%. And then Victor, who did LL mid-season, at 7.4%, as well as Data Doll at 7.4%. So in an effort to kind of equate that and come up with our biggest Blitz winners of 2024, what I've done is I've kind of done an adjustments and weightings, and we don't need to go over the formula, but I've come up with a weighting factor. So Zen was our number is the Dice Commando nudge is that Zen was our number 1 Blitz hero on the year with a factor of 30.8. Young Victor had a factor of 22.8, followed very, very closely by Blaze, who came in at 22.2. Armed Kayo came in at 19.4. And then Rhinar, that's right, who was only around for 1 season, still won so much, and such a big piece of the pie during Skirmish Season 9 that actually ended up in our number 5 spot, but you can see significantly below the heroes that were able to participate in 2 seasons at a factor of 11.8. Now, to be clear, there were a lot of heroes that were very, very, very close to Rhinar, but he did have an edge by about a factor of 2 over the next hero. All right. So those are whom I considered the big kids in the Blitz pool this year around. Now, as we went through this, it was no secret that Mistveil was a very good set. All right. So if we look at, we had all 3 Mistveil heroes run the top 5 for Classic Constructed. So if we look at the 8,293 CC points, Mistveil earned 2,115 of those for just over 25%, right? So Mistveil heroes combined for just over a quarter of the points. That said, Mistveil released partway through the year, and there was a significant number of points, 3,300, available during heavy hitter season. So if you normalize that, removing the 3,300 for when Mistveil was not around, there would have been 4,993 points available, of which Mistveil earned just over 2,100, pulling down over 40% of the LL points this season, as opposed to everyone else who, with the balance, got just shy of 58%. So quite a strong showing from Mistveil this year again. Shouldn't be a secret to anyone. And we should see them continue to do very, very, very well into 2025 with Zen likely going in RTN season. But we will see what Oops All Arachnes and the Hunted has coming for us. All right. Now, we started off the year with one of my favorite sets of all time, which was Heavy Hitters. I thought this landed very well. It was very entry player friendly. It was very, very math-based, harkened back to the good old days of, WTR. And also injected 5 new heroes, had 6 of them available with the return of Rhinar. Was a really, really, really phenomenal set. Was quite balanced. And the other cool thing that Heavy Hitters introduced was, that's right, the Marvel heroes. And to be clear, we had seen Marvel heroes before. They did not introduce that, but it really, Heavy Hitters brought the full spectrum of the young heroes and the adult heroes showing up within the set, and it set the stage for that going forward. So Heavy Hitters really checked all the boxes for me. I absolutely loved that set. I know that near the end of the meta, some of the competitive folks were starting to get tired of the math-based, but it was a pretty good meta, right? Overall, it was balanced looking at it. We then moved on to Mistveil. So this was a big, important set for Flesh and Blood because this was the entry into Japan, right? This was Flesh and Blood's big entry into Japan. So it was important for them that the power level be good enough that people want to play. And boy, did the power level deliver, because Mistveil has continued to drive the discussion in the game from a competitive standpoint through the end of the year. But what a gorgeous set. Absolutely phenomenally gorgeous set. Great themes in it. The chi mechanic could be clunky at times, but man, did it set for just gorgeous cards and the in-game there. Mistveil is an absolutely gorgeous set. Now, being blue-based, having a power level of a normal set, but being blue-based comes with its risks, and I think we are seeing the fallout, and we'll probably continue to feel the fallout for that for probably the first half of 2025, because the set is largely, as we're all familiar, the set's largely dependent on I beat you, you beat them, they beat me. So when the first point of the triangle falls, the other should follow accordingly. So I would expect that the Mistveil heroes will be probably not with us when we're having this discussion come 2025 at the end of 2025. But we will see. All right, then we moved on to Rosetta. I spent embarrassingly, I spent way too much money on this set. This set also landed very, very well for me. I was very heavy into Aurora. I'm really enjoying Aurora. My Warriors are really not good right now. So that's where I went, was into Aurora for, I had some motivations which didn't work out to that. Aurora didn't exactly land where I wanted it for that. But I enjoy playing her, and gave me a good reprieve from, time when my Warriors are really struggling. So this set also landed really well with a lot of people. The set has continued to have really strong EV. It also has a really fun thing going on with the Marvels, so much as with Mistveil, where they did the hero, the adult, and the young heroes. In Mistveil, they also did the chi cards, right? The Transcend cards were also Marvels, and the sigils played a large part in this set. And the sigils are actually pretty findable. Like sometimes you get 1 to 2 of them per case or so, like upwards of 2 per case. And it just feels really, they're only 15, 20 bucks. Maybe some of them are for like 40 bucks, but it just feels really good to open the set. It feels great to open the set. And I think that's part of why I've cracked a lot of sealed. And just gorgeous set. And again, the EV is pretty good, and very, very, very popular set as well. And the heroes have landed really, really, really well. Okay, so the other thing that came out of Rosetta, which I absolutely loved on pre-release weekend, was feet. Was feet? No, it wasn't just the feet. It was the puzzle cards on the back of the Sanctuary, and this was a huge win. I think we had a lot of fun as a group during pre-release trying to put this together. Right? Could everybody in the room get the cards that we needed to put together the various puzzles? Had a lot of fun with that. This has continued to be a favorite, even now that the set's been out for many, many months and it's worn off, people still talk about this, right? This was a huge win, and major props to LSS on this one. I think Rosetta landed really well. They did a lot of really cool things with it, and I'm sure it will set the stage for many, many other things coming forward. Okay. So next we move into the Armory deck product. This was a big deal in 2024. It had been announced, I want to say at Pro Tour in 2024. Maybe it had been announced at Worlds. I don't remember in 2023, but either way, this year was the big announcement. It was announced at Gamma this year. Actually, it was announced this year. It was at Gamma this year. So either way, something we've been waiting for 5 years, 4.5 years, and been clamoring for is an ready to play out of the box entry product for Classic Constructed format, as opposed to the Precon Blitz. And they delivered this year with the Armory decks. Now, the Armory deck, it is great and it's phenomenal to have these on board. There's been a total of 5 of them that launched in 2024. You see 3 of them here, plus we have the Dash.io deck and the Jarl deck. Now, the Jarl deck kind of like a super one. But again, and that Jarl deck is very clearly meant for established players. So very happy to have seen this product this year. I think it not only landed well, but was pretty well received overall as a concept. I do think the products have opportunities for improvement. There's a couple drawbacks to them. The Kayo deck was the first one to come out, and then there was a couple things out of that one. First, it had Savage Sash in it, which was absolutely phenomenal card, and some other good cards in there like Run Roughshod, stuff like that. So very chaseable, and it also landed when Kayo was arguably the best. It was pre-Mistveil when this came out, just pre-Mistveil. And it landed when Kayo was arguably the best hero in the format. Plus, it had power cards that he really could take advantage of. And this deck disappeared from shelves pretty quickly. And to this day, the Kayo Armory deck is actually $75. And this is on TCG Player. I've seen it going for more in other corners of the internet. So the takeaway from that part is, the Armory decks being a entry-level product, I think hasn't landed necessarily the same, because it has cards that are clearly targeted for established players of those heroes. To be fair, not everybody needs to go pick it up because you only care if you play those heroes. But because it's definitely targeted as basically a super expansion slot, so to speak, a lot of times they do disappear off the shelves. And when you have a hero that lands big, like again, Kayo being at top of the meta, or the Dash.io deck, where that was the talk of the town headed into Worlds, that deck is... actually, if you look that up, that deck's actually about still on price, so they had kind of at least helped with the allocate or the stock issue there. But the KO deck was definitely a problem. I don't think it ended up in very many new players' hands. It's mostly just established players. So this is something that will definitely, the Armory deck program is something that we'll definitely look at going forward in terms of how it can be improved. You know, there's some, the sideboard and lots of points about that in terms of the discussion. But I would say that this was both a big positive. I mean, it's a net positive for sure this year, right? I do think there's some negatives of it, like I mentioned. I don't know how much of a new player product it is, but either way, it's a good thing that we have it and they can improve on it going forward. So thank you, LSS, for getting this out and starting the process. Right, next up was the First Strike deck. So this launched as part of the, well, this was actually, the First Strike decks launched at Gen Con. But over the summer, they went really hard this year. LSS went very hard this year into conventions for really the first time ever. They had by and large not really had a convention presence, kind of deciding to do their own things, right? Callings, Battle Hardens, their own pre-release weekends, stuff like that, right? And by and large didn't partner up with larger conventions. And 2024 saw a deviation from that. And the biggest one was Gen Con with the early release of the First Strike decks and early release of the Azalea Armory deck. So these First Strike decks are a phenomenal product for getting people into the game. They do play really, really well together. I like the fact that Arcane is in there and it introduces them, so that's not such a shock, pun intended, when they see it for the first, when a player would see it for the first time. And this is, again, they are Blitz decks, right? So there's the plus and minus with that. But I think it's exactly correct for someone's first experience with Flesh and Blood. And it also does include sideboardable option, a couple loadout pieces to switch in with AB in case you're, playing another Terra. If you're Terra, playing another Terra or whatever, right? So I really appreciate that part of it. There was one drawback to these is as we're finding very consistently in Flesh and Blood's products, they had exclusives, being, Sizzle and Static Shock being the big ones from an Aurora point of view, right? Aurora being one of the big meta heroes from basically Rosetta onward. Sizzles were in high demand. At one point, I saw the Aurora Armory deck going for upwards of $20. It does look like a second wave has come out. My store still can't get them available. And, if I did some scouring the internet just to throw this together on Amazon, it's currently going for $20. We have on TCG Player, you can get a couple for close to cost, but with shipping, and for about $19 without shipping. And then we have ones that are selling for MSRP are basically out of stock across the board. And local to me, we do have one store that has them available, but it's for $18, right? So we're seeing a similar problem here in that because of these exclusive cards in there, they become needed by the real population. And when the player existing population is what I mean, when that population needs them to play Aurora deck or whatever, having the population go out and buy two of these, A, feels bad. B, it also depletes the supply. And again, my store's been out of First Strike decks since opening weekend. So that did not help new players from that regard, right? Now, certainly some people who bought them have taught new players with those decks, for sure. But there's other people who bought them, ripped them, took the Sizzles, the Static Shocks, or whatever else was in there, Proton Rushes, and moved on. So I do think that is, again, this is a great product. I expect to see this product for a while. I don't know if they'll maybe do another wave or First Strike every year or what their plan is there. No idea. But going forward, I think for something like this, maybe just print less of them and have them less desirable to the player base. I don't know what the answer is. I'm not going to pretend to know what the answer is, but having them not on the shelves and having them marked up is not that's not effective as a new player product, right? So great product, but needs some tweaking. Okay. But again, another big win coming out of 2024. And I do believe it is a net positive. Right now, I want to talk about organized play because this has been a massive year for organized play. So we had world premieres sell out very early, very well ahead of time across the board. I believe the only one that didn't sell out was the heavy hitters one, which was down in New Zealand, which is difficult for many people in parts of the world to get to. But the one in the US sold out. We've seen that the one in Europe for the Hunted is sold out. It's in Prague. That one's sold out. And the Rosetta one was sold out. And the Mistveil one, I believe, was sold out as well. And actually, I'm confident it was in Tokyo. So very, very effective there for the world premieres. People are traveling to do this stuff. They want to be there for the first set just to be there. and that's pretty cool. We also had the 50th calling this year in Portland, my hometown. There's been plenty of coverage on that on this channel, so I don't want to keep harping on it, but it was also the very first commoner battle hardened was that weekend, which kind of fits into something we'll talk about below, which is really a change in focus this year. We'll talk about that in a second. Furthermore, we had events nearly every weekend this year, and in fact, some weekends had events going on in multiple geographies. So we've gotten very used to having a calling and a battle hardened on the same weekend. Fun fact, next year in Nashville, there's a double calling weekend, which is interesting. But usually it's a calling and a battle hardened plus a pro quest maybe in there, something like that, right? But at the same time, on another side of the globe, you might have a battle hardened. So there's been multiple weekends where we've had multiple battle hardens going on, never two callings at the same time, or at least not yet. And I don't believe they'll do that. I think they'll probably stick to just one calling. But calling and battle hardens definitely happened. And on top of that, the game has been upped. The bar has been raised for coverage and presence, like web presence. They're on the YouTubes. I think they're streaming in other places and really selling this product as the premier competitive game that is out there right now. And I think they've really delivered on that, right? Obviously, you have to give a shout out to Ethan and Nathan and Savage Feats for physically doing it, but LSS is the ones enabling it, right? We also have the folks from 3 Floating who've been doing their own thing and also utilized by LSS to really get out there and give the kids what they want, right, and help sell it. The opening night at the Armory commercial was amazing, and just keep their the presence across the virtual globe in terms of what this is doing. And I know that doesn't directly tie in with organized play, but it really does, because you can utilize the organized play focus coverage to get that out. So I think that works really, really, really well and has been a huge positive for 2024. So to everyone at LSS, huge shout out to Trevor Baker for being, Trevor and his team are the drivers behind this. So, great job. 2024 misses in terms of organized play. There were only 2 skirmish seasons. So this wasn't so much an organized play miss, just as much as kind of a tactical miss. So this really hurt Blitz because functionally because of what was happening, they injected so many heroes. They needed the points balance. So in skirmish season 9, those points came and they hadn't done the proper thing to balance Zen. And skirmish season 9 was kind of a train wreck, right? We had a lot of heroes go, many of which were close regardless. But when you can have someone LL in 2 weeks, you have too many points on the board, but you have to have too many points on the board because you only have 2 skirmish seasons. So next year, 2025, we will have 3 skirmishes again. That will really help a lot. They also have the points leveling, which will help people LLing too fast. It won't solve the bloat problem, but one thing at a time. And then on top of that, skirmish has also been significantly diluted. So skirmishes historically have been, stores have been able to choose from Blitz or limited, Blitz or sealed. And this year we added Living Legend into the mix, which I do believe is a good thing from the overall picture and probably long-term sustainability of the game. I do think it hurts growth a little bit, but maybe that's not where the focus needs to be. So I'll default to them on that. I do think, for example, in skirmish season 10, my store was the only Blitz one in town, and it actually had better attendance than any of the other ones. So I think people do need to take note of that there is a demand out there for Blitz, because what we're seeing is so many of the competitive players who've been I shouldn't say competitive, I say the entrenched players. They want to go play LL because they've got their old heroes and they want to play them, and I completely get it. But you're also eschewing newer players. So we'll have to see how that balance works out long term. They can always walk it back, right? They can always walk for skirmish season 14 down the road. Maybe they'll walk it back and it'll be only Blitz, whatever it may be. But in skirmish season 10, by the way, stores could choose from sealed, Blitz, or LL. So it farther diluted. So that is a continued risk. So I do think that falls in the misses, because I think long term that's probably not going to work out well. But we will see. Let me know your thoughts below if you agree or if you disagree. All right. I mentioned hero bloat. So this was a big year for hero release, no secret there. 14 brand new CC heroes, right? The ones released normally in the set, as well as Jarl and Ira. So Ira came obviously World's Weekend, Jarl through his Armory deck. 14 new CC heroes and 15 new Blitz heroes. So we had Enigma New Moon as a bonus in Mistveil. We had Terra come out of the first strike, and we had Blaze as the convention exclusive on top of the other heroes released through the year. That's a lot of heroes at, now that everybody's 1,000, that's 14,000 LL points that would be needed, minus the 8,000 for this year. We had 15 new Blitz heroes, 15,000, minus actually, I don't know off the top of my head what the adjusted is now. I should have done that math. I apologize. But it wasn't 15,000. I'll tell you that, right? So we do have a bloat, and whether it's a problem or not, I don't know. But at some point, long run, I do think that bloat becomes a challenge for them from a design standpoint. Maybe not in Blitz, but in CC it definitely does. So that's definitely, I do think that was a negative this year. It was really cool getting, again, I sung great praise for all of the sets except for kind of long-term. Mistveil, again, great, beautiful set. I think long-term we're going to, look back on that set very differently than a lot of the fans do today. But, overall, the sets were very good. They were very awesome because of all the new heroes. They were exciting. But I think that they dug a hole for themselves that might take a bit to get out of during the future years, because it's not going to happen in 2025 either. It's going to take them a long time to recover from this many heroes. Furthermore, I do have to call out a miss. I actually shot a whole video around this earlier, calling, basically saying, look, with Blaze and Ira and this new method of releasing either convention exclusives or event exclusives or whatever it may be, Blaze and Ira specifically, they still have not today, and this has been months now, the card legality policy is still not updated. And this is a huge miss on their part, because the card legality policy says new cards become legal for official tournament play on the release date of the product they are from. Blaze and Ira are not from a product. Now, to be clear, no one is arguing that these two heroes are legal. No one is arguing that. We have articles showing that they're legal. They're on the LL board. We get it. They are completely legal. So just update the card policy, the card legality policy. It's not only is it inconsistent, but it shows that they're maybe not on top of it. It could read that they're not on top of things. So just go fix it, right? I do think this is a big negative. I'm confident they can get this fixed. I'm a little surprised it hasn't gotten done yet. I am a little surprised I'm the only one not calling this out. I haven't seen anybody else mention this other than myself. So maybe it's a me problem, but I would like to see that. I'd like to see that get fixed. All right. So in conclusion, a couple of things. The biggest thing for me in 2024 that I think is more than any of the other positives and praises we've sung is we've begun to see a shift in 2025. To be clear, we're not there yet, but we're getting there. And we've begun to see a shift in 2024 of changing the focus to approaching casual players. And that doesn't mean we're making the game a casual game. It's still going to remain a competitive game. So pump the brakes, okay? But they're now looking at growth in terms of not new markets, right? They're kind of there's still markets to go into, to be clear, but they're slowly running out of new markets, right? There's no big Japans to go into and stuff like that anymore, right? So the challenge they have now is expanding not geographies, but expanding markets, going after new types of players. And the First Strike was a very big thing. Going into conventions was a big part of that. Going into having First Strike available for that was a major part of that. There is a shift. Not only that, but we've got the gym packs that have been announced for next year. We have the they took away the armory points, right? Or not the points for the armory, but you no longer qualified with points. It was actually 2023, I believe. But either way, you've seen this huge shift in 2024 towards being more approachable and trying to get more people in playing the game, because that is where long-term the growth is going to come from. There's only so many people that can be on the Pro Tour. There's only so many people that are going to top 8, right? But if you want to keep growing in volume, you're going to have to approach those filthy casuals, and you can come hang out with me. Okay, so I do think that's probably the biggest win of 2024. This 5th year of Flesh and Blood is really changing the focus of who the game is and what FaB is, right? FaB will always be I believe FaB will always be the premier competitive game. And I think that's a good thing, because that's what FaB's built itself on. But there can be people playing the game who aren't in that. And I believe that that's FaB's new vision for future growth. And I embrace it and I love it. So as I move to close this out, again, I want to be very clear. 2024 was a huge year, right? It started off with me getting to go to Queenstown. I got to leave the North American continent for the first time in my life, go down, meet these folks, meet a whole bunch of you. I've seen a whole bunch of people over the course of the year. And, I want to thank LSS for continuing to put in the work that they put in for continuing to involve so many of us in it. I mean, and be so approachable. I mean, you can go give James a handshake or a high five at an event if you go. Like, how many CEOs of a company that sells you games can you do that? Not very many. It's pretty awesome, right? You have Brian, who's he's on every podcast in town. Wants you to just get out and talk to people. Extremely approachable company, and they've continued to hold that really core identity for 5 years now, even as they've grown and had stones thrown on them and stuff like that. So again, thank you, LSS, for continuing to do that. And lastly, thank you all, right? We've been doing this for 5 years now, and we've grown immensely. I cannot believe how many of you, just come up, fist bumps, high fives, or whatever at events, the positive comments. I appreciate it. So thank you all. And then to my channel members, you all are awesome. Thank you for helping me do what I want to do, and we can do fun things then, like New Year's parties and tournaments and scarf for scarfs and get them all to you and all that stuff, right? So I'm a huge fan of what we've seen in 2024, arguably more than any other year we've seen. I know it's easy to say that in the moment, but I do think 2024 has probably been the biggest year in FaB we've seen. It might not have been like the best year, the most positive year, depending on your focus, right? I know a lot of people are burning out, and Mistveil hurt a lot of people, not at the competitive scene, but Mistveil hurt a lot of local players. It's made them feel eschewed. There's been positives and negatives this year, but I do think that this has been probably the most impactful year that we've had. Probably ever. I mean, obviously releasing the game, kicking it off is pretty impactful, but this is a big year. And 2025 looks to be a continuation of that, but it all started this year, the 5th year. So anyway, thank you all for not only joining me today, but for joining me all year. Happy holidays, whatever you choose to celebrate or don't. Be safe, know you're loved, and go Commando.